Kyle,
were you trying to live stream from like a back of a party bus after prom? I mean, you got the look, right, between the background. You're looking good.
I wish that was the story actually, but no. I had to kind of get in here and get on this live as soon as possible. I was somewhere of importance, Kyle.
I see. I was too. I was trying to be.
I was somewhere of importance. So great. So let me just check with my marketing team. We are audio's good. Looks like video's good. They will message me if it's not, I believe. So anyway, the beauties of live streaming. Kyle, thanks a lot for coming to whatever this is I'm trying to do. I don't know if it's a podcast. I don't know if it's really like a series of video interviews. I don't even know if it's an interview. I'm not quite sure what to call this thing, but this is my second one, and it's part of my whole thing about lead generation being dead, or lead generation is dead. I did an ebook a few weeks ago, kind of talking about this, and wanted to get the best, brightest specialists of the world to kind of talk with me about these topics. So,
So they didn't respond, and so you got me.
well, I did Raymond first, right? And then I said,
Yeah. You got to. That was good one. Good start there. That man lives, eats, and breathes bourbon. I mean, sorry, lead generation. He all the time. Yeah. But yeah, that's a good start.
So my audience might already know you, obviously, but maybe you can do like a little intro yourself, your background. How do you know Config, me, whatever, however you want to word that.
Yeah, so it's September, right? So 20 some odd years ago, September 2001, I was unemployed, took my first sales job just because the market was nasty and had no idea what I was getting myself into. I think I accepted the job on September 7th or something like that, 2001. Showed up the week, or so 9/11 happened, and I showed up that week for my first inside sales role, and they pick on the new sales guys all the time, so they assigned me to New York City. So my first sales job was cold calling into New York City days and weeks after the 9/11 attacks, selling stuff that I had no idea, I had no idea what I was doing or what I was even talking about, to very, very upset New Yorkers. So that was kind of a dive right into the deep end of phone-based selling. It was 2001. For some reason, over time, I ended up liking it. Maybe just I kind of liked the abuse. Certainly learned some colorful language and some good insults. But over time, we actually grew the business. Started enjoying it. Understood what it took to build pipelines for other companies and to help them out. Ended up moving to Singapore from the U.S. to Singapore a couple of years later. Built up the same business across the region. Ended up in desperate need for some young, aggressive talent. A young, ambitious Will Gilchrist came through the door, and I looked at that man's face. I looked at you and I said, this is a man who's got a face for phone sales. I know you can make this magic happen.
Not a face for live streaming, Kyle?
I hope this technology is going okay for you. I feel for you. No. So you came through the doors as well, but we've been doing variations of pipeline building, mainly for tech companies, but any B2B company, on and off ever since. And as you are exhibit A of the fact that this is a massively evolving and changing type of space. So you came out a couple of weeks ago declaring lead generation is dead, and so I wanted to join here and find out what the heck you're talking about.
Oh man, so you're just gonna put it on me, huh?
This is your problem.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, considering you're the man that effectively taught me what lead gen is,
and now you're out killing it. You're destroying everything that I've created. Yes. But okay, go ahead.
I'm chopping the tree down completely, right? The reality is, look, the reason why I'm saying lead generation is dead is because everybody's using the term. right? So effectively, nobody even really knows what it means anymore. It doesn't actually have a real definition because you can look at a digital marketing agency that goes out and let's say just does advertising alone, and then people respond to those ads, and then they fill out an inquiry form, and that company, that marketing agency will go around and say, we provide lead generation services.
Yep.
Or you'll have a BPO, right? That BPO will go make 2 or 3 phone calls, right? They will use a previous book of business and get 10 people to respond. It's the same 10 people every time. And they will tell people they do lead generation services. You'll have a consultant who will buy the product and resell it himself. He will say, or she will say, they do lead generation services.
Yep.
Right. So effectively, lead generation can be classified in so many different ways now that it's gotten to a point to where the word itself is really evolving to please help me. I want revenue.
Yeah, I guess in other ways, it's evolved or expanded so much that it's actually lost any meaning of what we're talking about, right? So, would that be fair to say, or is it just gone so many different directions?
Absolutely. I mean, before, a lead was an opportunity for someone to go and sell. That's what it was, just an opportunity for someone to go and sell. It is a lot more than that now. I mean, if you look at, let's say, the door-to-door salesperson, the person back in the day, let's say in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, who was doing door-to-door sales, they were selling window washing equipment, right? Or window washing spray or something. You'd have to go generate your own leads. You have to walk out there, knock on a door, ask for a time, showcase a product, spray it around, wipe it, showcase it, and then from there, you're going to hopefully go home, give them a call the next day. Here's a sample of it. Try it for a week. And I'm going to give you a call back to see whether or not you want to actually buy the subscription for the cleaner.
Right.
That's lead generation, right?
Sure is. Yeah, it doesn't sound any different than, just have the guy have an app and put a 10x multiple to the stock options. So sure. Yeah, I think that I think that the lead gen, and we'll still use it as lead gen. We'll define it as that. It's certainly a messy space. There's a lot of different ways to go about it. I guess for this conversation, should it be fair to say that we should stick to B2B sales? That's what background I think that both of us are focused on, right?
Well, definitely. Well, definitely. But also at the same time, I would say that lead generation is a sub part of that, right? In order to have a B2B sell, you would have to have some form of a lead, I just hate the word lead gen now because it's like, I know as soon as I say it, the assumption is, lead gen. You just described a sell, but.
Or the expectation is that it's basically somebody showing up with a check in hand. And is that?
Or such a burning desire. I have a theory as to why this is, and we can get to it definitely later, but such a burning desire to buy that they're practically sold anyway.
Right.
They're trying to cut out the sales process, right?
Right. Correct.
Which is the bigger challenge. But what is your take on it? Do you actually?
Yeah, I was thinking about it. Like between you and I, we've got probably 35 years or so experience in this dismal space. And I say that dismally, like it is a dismal space because it is the gap between where marketing sort of ends and where sales sort of begins. And nobody really wants to own it because it's hard to define. It's hard to keep both sides happy, right? Because if marketing delivers a super qualified lead, traditionally what happens is sales runs with it, closes it, high fives each other saying, hey, we're the greatest salespeople ever. And marketing, you just keep doing whatever you're doing. Now flip that and go, okay, marketing sends over a lukewarm to long-term lead. Sales reps run with it. Nothing happens. All fingers get pointed to marketing. Oh, it's, you guys give me crap leads, and marketing goes, you guys are crap at following up on my leads. And so you get this disconnect between sales and marketing. Now, this is not a new problem at all. This has happened forever. I think that in today's space, because there are so many channels to be able to get our message out, to be able to build, try different pipeline activities. If anything, that disconnect is even greater today. So that's how I come to this conversation, thinking about the situation and think about some of the companies that I'm working with, trying to untangle this and then rethink about it from a 2023 and beyond world. Because I think that there's a lot of fundamental changes that have happened, which actually in general are very positive, but I don't think a lot of companies have taken advantage of it yet. So we can get into that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I definitely want to touch on that marketing and sales part. I mean, I think in terms of that gradient between marketing and sales, when it kind of transfers over, I think I kind of lean slightly on the sales portion of it more than the marketing portion of it, based on experience, which the experience that I've had, right, which is that more often than not, very few marketing departments have the actual sales target responsibility. At the
Correct.
end of the day, the buck doesn't really stop at them. So whether
Yep.
it's qualified or not qualified, the people that actually have a sales target, where more often than not, marketing has activity response targets, exposure targets, and things like that. Sales has an actual like revenue target. And the
Yeah.
company is so dependent on the revenue itself that I think that's where the hostility kind of comes from, because the whole company isn't sharing the KPI the company is based on, which is, are we
Yeah.
generating more revenue? Are we getting more profitable?
Look, I'll give you an example. This was years ago, but it still happens today, where a big tech company marketing put a booth at an event. People showed up to the event, and they came up with this creative idea where they were they were giving away these giant cookies, right? So if you could get a cookie if you filled out this survey or something like that, you obviously gave away all your contact details. They had 100 cookies. They got 100 leads of people. The definition for success for that day was they wanted to get 100 leads out of that event. And so they walked out of there with 100 pieces of paper that were all filled in. All the marketing people are high-fiving, right? They've nailed it. They give it to us, the outsourced lead gen follow-up company, and our guys do the follow-up.
There you
Zero
go.
out of 100. Not one person was qualified in any way, shape, or form. But in that example, in that case, the marketing team had successfully achieved their target. So I think it's exactly what you're talking about, because sales is sitting there now with nothing. But I would also say that on the flip side of this, I believe that there is a unreasonable expectation from many sales teams that what they are being handed is a band qualified lead, which is basically somebody in an advanced stage of buying. And so I think that expectation then gets very quickly it collapses, because most leads that are generated, I think the percentage I saw, 77% of leads are not qualified. They might still be long-term opportunities, but they're just not qualified. So sales reps are spending huge amounts of time having these conversations that don't go anywhere, at least initially. They get frustrated and then they blame marketing. So this is a two-way problem in my mind. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, well, no, absolutely, because I can actually speak to the other side too. So even though I just did a whole stance on how this is where sales is coming from, in terms of, okay, they can just hit a number and then effectively it's a sales problem.
Yeah.
More often than not, I've seen individuals who are unable to sell a deal. And instead of, I mean, who's going to walk around and say, I couldn't sell this, or I was a bad salesperson today? No one's going to say that. What they're going to say is what? The lead was bad. Hey, the opportunity was bad, right? So sometimes it can be a cop out as well. And that's in defense of marketing, so that kind of, as you said, like hot potato moment, it's fascinating. It's, if your sales team can't sell, to blame the leads, right? But if they can, it doesn't close. Sometimes they're given crap as well, right? And I think that's where defining what's most important for the businesses and how they need to see this process is part of the reason why I'm really holding on to this lead generation is dead thing, because I think the whole conversation is a little bit incorrect, right?
Yeah, look, and this this is a conversation I've been having since I started this thing 20 years ago. So no, I don't think from that standpoint anything's changed. If you can come in here and just put a bullet through this thing, kill it, and then we can rebuild something, I'm all in because the conversation hasn't changed, right? The disconnect between sales and marketing is I don't think we're in much better place in most companies that I end up speaking to. A lot of the startups, a lot of the smaller companies, they go through a nice honeymoon phase where marketing and sales are holding hands and they're puppy dogs and rainbows, and it's great for about 6 months to a year. But then all of a sudden, when the numbers start really catching up to people, that's where the tensions start flaring, and then the disconnect starts growing. So I think that to your point, okay, lead gen's dead. So okay, we've killed it. Let's rebuild this thing. So now I'm making this your problem again. How do you rebuild this, and how are you doing this? Tell me.
I think it's a mindset shift. I think it's a mindset shift, right? I think the narrative that we like to believe in terms of, look, we want a healthy, it goes to pipeline development, right? How healthy is your pipeline? And how many companies actually know what a pipeline is? And what I mean by pipeline is your book of potential prospects over the course of the next 12 to 36 months. Yeah, I said it, 12 to 36 months. But no one can think that far. And most companies, particularly in the SME space and below, can't even think like that because of this emergence of this VC money and everybody listening to podcasts about an exit, about a 12-month exit or an 18-month exit. So they're so busy chasing the clock that they're pushing false revenue and trying to find a get-rich-quick scheme. Right? When in reality, businesses back in the day, you didn't start a business to be able to just suddenly leave it in 24 months.
Right.
But that wasn't a thing. Like, oh yeah, I'm starting a business so I can not be in this business 2 years from now. That was not a thing in the 50s, right? Not a thing in the 60s, 70s. I mean, you're only getting into just post.com era where that reality started to come about, and then it became
.com definitely, yeah.
And then it became the norm. Like, oh, so when are you going to exit? You got to have an exit strategy right away.
You and I were at a meeting. You probably don't remember it, and with this prospect of yours, and the guy, the entire conversation was his exit strategy, and he hadn't even sold a damn thing yet. It was just like he was talking about leaving. It's like how fast can I get away from this, because this is a recipe for disaster, right?
So how could you think of a pipeline that's 36 months if you're not even planning on existing as a company?
Right. Well, look, I think actually, I think that the recent downturn in the tech space, while it's nasty and disruptive and a lot of people lost jobs, it was needed, right? I mean, we've been going through with low interest rates and all this other stuff. So there's a lot of free to near free money that was sloshing around. A lot of that nonsense has corrected itself to a degree. So I'm not hearing that type of stuff anymore. I'm now actually hearing companies who are saying, look, we need to actually sell stuff rather than position ourselves for the next round of funding. Because the next round of funding is not necessarily coming. You've actually got to be self-sufficient, right? So I think that for guys like you and I who focus on actually pipelines, I think this is a good time to be around here, because a lot of companies actually need to be serious again and actually put more focus on building sincere, legitimate pipe, whether it is 3 months out, which is fine, that's great, but the real meat and the real gold is sitting 12 plus months out. And I think that more and more companies just need to have that mindset. Going back to your point, so I think we're in agreement there.
Well, absolutely. I think that the challenge is now that people have woken up definitely after COVID, because inbound leads were not guaranteed anymore. There were individuals just living off of inbound opportunities pre-COVID, right? And that was boosting their numbers and conversions, and they were able to identify a sales cycle where really no one sold anything. People were just coming to them because business was moving everywhere. But when that kind of dried up, of course, the mindset has shifted, but the actual knowledge on what sales means, you'd have to have experience to do that, right? You'd have to know what you don't know the cold calls. You'd have to know what it takes to convert. you'd have to know so many things that you haven't spent the last 10 to 15 years doing, that your I mean, I couldn't even tell you how many times we've been given targets that don't make any sense at all. I mean, it's literally like, hey, look, we're looking for $10 million in the next 6 weeks. I mean, even if it sounds weird, right? I mean, I was going to quote the 40-Year-Old Virgin movie, but I don't think I can do that on this live. But, it's like, that doesn't even sound like it's believable. And anybody who would put those expectations on, you're not only saying no, but you're saying no and saying, have you ever sold anything before? Have you ever looked at a pipeline? No, nobody does those type of figures in that type of time frame. So now there's a re-education of the market as well, because you have a lot of people say, okay, we need to sell, we need to close business, but they still have a previous mindset, which is quick, fast pipeline, short-term pipe conversion, this inbound mentality, when in reality, your business actually has to sell.
Well, and then the other piece of this, and hopefully we're not just being grumpy old men yelling at clouds here, but maybe we are.
I'm already on the whiskey. I'm already grumpy old man now.
Yeah. This is post-party. You look like you're in the post-party, just grumpiness state, right? But that's fine. So I think that you get the reality will set in, right? And so what will happen is a lot of salespeople will leave, and it'll hopefully leave behind the reps that know what they're doing. But here's where I think about today and moving beyond, because I think that lead gen, you've killed lead gen. So pipeline building, I think has and is changing to a degree. It's not necessarily what it was 15, 20 years ago, where we could just give you here's a spreadsheet with 100 names, go call them. You've made this point many times before. It's harder to cold call these days. It's harder to literally get through to a human being, harder than it ever was before. It's harder to do an email blast, especially a cold email blast. So like a lot of the traditional outbound lead gen efforts as standalone don't really work. So to me, what we need to think about is, okay, what are the tactics? We can talk about the strategy, but the strategy is, okay, let's revisit all of the different tactics that are out there. What's your first guest, Raymond, right? He uses the cookbook all the time. What's your cookbook look like? What are the pieces of that recipe that are going to be in there? What's the plan? And I think that that's starting to shift a little bit. And one of the things that I'm arguing and working on with companies is to say, a lot of these new lead gen approaches, it's not necessarily just the solo lone wolf salesperson on his or her own. It actually takes more of a team. You need marketing involved to be able to do more of the messaging, to do more of the SEO, to do more of the content creation, to figure out the channels to get these things out and about. Many companies have what we call existing customer managers or customer success teams. Those teams need to be involved to be able to build up stronger relationships with existing customers who can potentially grow an account or certainly refer other types of accounts. And so all of a sudden, when you start thinking about the pipeline tactics that are out there, when I start thinking about it, it actually involves a lot more people internally rather than just externally. And so you kind of have to switch away from that lone wolf mentality where, just one single salesperson is going to go out and solve all of the problems. I think it takes more integration these days. And so that's what I'm spending time with companies trying to figure out how they can actually integrate these groups together. Because as we said at the beginning, sales and marketing don't play well together historically. We've talked about that ending for 2 decades, at least I have for 2 decades, but now it actually has to happen or else everything's screwed.
No, absolutely. And I think that, look, if you go to any large company or any medium-sized company, if you ask specifically, if you go to the marketing team, you specifically ask them, what does this person specifically do every day in the sales team? You're really not good. You're going to get a scripted answer or maybe a job description, right? But no one's going to be able to actually understand the intricacies of each other's role. right? They're
Right.
playing hot potato. I get my task done to this level. This is what is expected of me. And then that gets handed over. As long as I do that, our CMO is going to be happy with what I do. The
Right.
salesperson gets it and tries to close. If I hit my number, VP of sales is happy with what I do, right? But the two
Yep.
individuals under those two departments can't quite talk because they're incentivized totally differently. They're
Yep.
structured differently, right? And it's
Yep.
almost a design. So, I mean, even though we're saying that these two departments have to work together, and I like the point you're making about customer success. That's the feedback loop. That's, hey, this is what's also going on, right? Like, by
Yep.
the way, sales. But how do you get people to really in an organization care to go that far, quote unquote, outside of their role to learn a new trade?
Look, I think in many cases people behave the way they're incentivized, and so it's interesting that I get a lot of pushback on that statement. People don't think that's true. I disagree. So we can kind of look at the numbers and see how that works, but you need to integrate incentives both from a marketing, biz dev, and sales standpoint. And it doesn't have to be completely the same, but there's creative ways to get marketing to win when deals of theirs end up closing. Sometimes it's trickier, but and like the easiest way in an SMB space is that everybody gets some comp on revenue or profit share based on actual deal flows, right? So there's definitely ways to do that. So that would be the first step that I would recommend. And it's going to look differently in every single company. That's absolutely fine, but we've got to incentivize people the same way. The second thing to do is, I think a lot of times you get these marketing tribes that end up building, and then you get sales tribes that end up building, and that's where problems start. You can actually reorg this, and I haven't really seen anybody change names, but I've seen kind of working groups where they basically the marketing and salespeople have to work together as a small team. It's almost like an agile team structure in a marketing and sales environment, which gets them actually thinking about things from different perspectives. You want to bring marketing people in on these sales calls and watch the sales people get beat up. Right? You want marketing to kind of understand a lead follow-up process. Have them in the line of fire, and that'll certainly do it. On the flip side, have a sales rep go and take a look at how messy some of this marketing world is, trying to get inbound up and running, and the effort it takes to get some of this momentum going, right? So it's really eye-opening to be able to see the world from a different perspective. So I'm seeing that in some cases help. So all of those would be ways to do that, or ideas to get started. And again, I'll keep going back to customer success, because I think that the customer success teams are actually a part of the lead gen strategy or the pipeline building strategy as well, because the fastest deals that ever close are going to be coming from referrals, and the best referrals are from your existing customers, right? So I think we're looking right. So I think that they need to be tied into this as well. One of the things that I'm guilty of this, I used to do this as well, is I used to push to get the customer success team trained with the sales team. So let's train every customer facing rep the same way. I've actually changed or evolved some of the way I think about that. They all require the same customer facing skills in terms of conversations, consultative mindsets, consultative approaches. But I do think that the customer success teams need their own training that follows the methodology and processes that they need to go through to be successful. So I think that a lot of the customer success people that I end up meeting are really project managers who have just taken on a different type of role, and they're behaving like project managers rather than customer success. So I think there's opportunities there as well.
That's actually interesting. Kind of with all that, if they are synergized, if marketing, sales, and customer success is synergized more, they are working in these small pods or small platoons, so to speak. That kind of goes back to your first kind of point that you were making earlier, which was now we have phone trees. Now we have spam lists. Now we have GDPR. Now we have so many things that remove the opportunity for a new business conversation. You know, I don't know where I sit with this, but regardless of if these two groups are synergized or not, these things still exist.
Yep.
And I believe that the reason why they've been set up is because there's so much pollution in terms of how, I mean, there wouldn't be a need for a spam blocker if people weren't doing large waves of irrelevant, there wouldn't even need to be a GDPR if people weren't doing large waves of irrelevant emails, right? There wouldn't need to be a phone tree if, there weren't, scum like me doing cold calls,
Yep.
15 years ago, right?
Yep.
So despite all these three groups together, and I mean, I'll definitely let you go first to kind of crack on this. How does that solve that problem of the wall of the new business opportunity, right?
So that's a massively important question, and I think that the defenses that have popped up are a response to the offenses of sales reps or customer facing reps who, I guess we're guilty, but then the entire industry blew up and ended up just spamming, right? Whether it's cold call, robocall, emails, all the other garbage, and that's continuing to expand. So nobody wants to hear it, right? The evolution happens on the sales side as well, which means that we as salespeople have access to more information than we've ever had before. I mean, LinkedIn, as just one massive example, is the biggest, cleanest B2B database or business database in the history of the planet. And most people don't really use it in a smart way, but that's the key, which is we have so much information. It takes we need to be more detectives now. We need marketing to work with sales to be more detectives and to do more. I think that one of the growing trends, is not new, but it's growing, is the account-based marketing. I ended up talking to a lot of sales reps who they focus on like an account plan, and they call it ABM, account-based marketing. And I'm kind of going like, I agree with you, but the answer is in the name. It's a marketing thing. So this is where sales and marketing are just integrated without even necessarily knowing they're integrated together.
Right.
And so what you've got from the selling side is a hell of a lot more access to information. But the sales team, the customer facing team, whether it's marketing, whether it's biz dev, whether it's sales, whether it's customer success, they need to be using this data in a smarter way to be able to give out more custom messages. So I see the blockers happening, but I also see new opportunities opening up based on all the information that's out there to give people the ability to give much more targeted pitches and messages, as long as they're being smart about it. But it's not like it was 20 years ago where, it's smiling and dialing. You can do it occasionally, but it's not as easy anymore.
No, 100%. I mean, I was going to echo that point. I think customized targeted messaging is key still. But that does require significant amounts of research. And who's going to do that? And when you have a sales rep that's chasing a 4-week sales target, do they have time to be able to create targeted messaging with marketing? Because even though marketing is going to be executing that, the sales rep is going to have to feed, and that's why I'm really big on feedback loops, right? From customer success, how are our current clients enjoying what's going on? That's important information for a sales rep, so they can say, by the way, our last 10 clients have been experiencing this and it's going great. Then based on that sell, also feeding that back to marketing by saying, we need to probably promote these qualities about our business because it seems like that's working, right? That conversation isn't happening, and that would be the way that we're able to have more of a targeted messaging out there. But then when you have the get rich quick ideology of the company, who's going to risk their job to try to change how sales is done in the organization? It has to come from
not only that. Look, not only the get rich stuff, the get rich quick stuff doesn't work, and it's not going to work. And so there's a couple pieces here, but first of all, the short-term targets should be adjusted accordingly. So it's not to say that you need to ignore short-term behavior, because that's a hall pass for people to get lazy and to not do work, right? So I think what people do, or companies or sales leaders do, is that they just lean on old metrics because they feel like they can't just, they know we've got a 6 to 12 to 18 month sales cycle, but they still want to see short-term wins. And even though those don't really come through anymore, it's almost like they're just kind of going through the motions. It's a bit fake. So one of the things would be, let's actually create shorter term metrics to be able to measure performance, and knowing that the longer term results either do or do not kick in, but you can kind of measure that down the road. So a shorter term way to look at that would be to measure daily, weekly behavior, both from a sales side or a marketing side.
So that's interesting. Right. When you mention longer term results and down the road, I mean, I very rarely, and I probably do sound like a grumpy old man right now, I very rarely have seen the companies with a 36-month thought of the business, or even a 12-month reality. We have 12-month wants.
Right.
If we want to make X, so our sales team is going to have to do this. We're going to create short-term plans that are pretty much divided by 4, because that's a quarter, and then from there, that's someone's sales target. I want this, so your target is that divided by 4 every quarter. And
right.
I'm just wondering, how can we work with the market, not just from a lead gen perspective, but also from just speaking on behalf of the sales reps and the market. Everybody's kind of suffering under this reality, right? And I know this is not a lead generation is dead, but the whole concept of revenue generation, right? How do you think that we can instruct leaders, companies, and managers to understand that this mindset needs to be shifted to where we need to have proper forecasts and an understanding of how healthy a pipeline is and what pipeline means quarter on quarter? Even though you're providing new opportunities in, this pipeline is constantly growing. You can always resell into it to convert.
Look, I think the market will do it. And I think the market is doing it now. The market is shit canning companies that are leaning on next round of funding, that think that it's coming based on the fact that there was so much free, easy money for the last 15 years or so. And I think that there's going to be, and there already is, a massive collapse and consolidation that's at play here. So there's a massive opportunity for, at the individual level and a sales leadership level, for those people to step up and actually build a strong long-term strategy. It might mean that their current company is not the environment that's going to hold, but the companies that will last are the ones that are going to have more of a robust longer-term plan in place. The market will take care of a lot of this short-term nonsense that's been happening. So I'm confident that that's there. The other piece that I just wanted to bring up too, which I think ties into this, is that there's pretty low sales employee engagement. There's low employee engagement across industries or across other groups as well, but in the sales world, it's particularly low. And I think that, I think that the pandemic kind of sparked people to put more emphasis on this. And what I mean by that is that, the pandemic happens, we all go home, we're all kind of staying at home, and it's like you have this moment where you go, well, wait a minute, I can kind of do some of this from home, and do I really care about this company? Do they care about me? Yeah. You hear about like these mass layoffs happening via Zoom and all this other stuff. And you go, well, wait a minute, what am I doing? What's the purpose here? And a lot of the times I'm seeing this here is that there's a lot of sales teams, a lot of individuals that just don't have, I would say, a real enthusiasm or a sincere feeling of like wanting to do the particular job. And I think that like I think one of the biggest secret opportunities that's out there is for leaders from a sales, marketing, or customer facing standpoint to be able to have that honest conversation with their teammates to say, like, what is it that you want? What do you want? It's kind of it's a reset, right? Post pandemic, let's reshuffle the deck here, but it's up to you. Everybody got a taste of autonomy. They all had to work at home. They all had to do their own thing. They weren't being monitored by, they weren't in cube farms all of a sudden. And now everybody's being pulled back.
Right.
And
I think the light, right?
They saw the light. They had that Matrix moment where they put their head out of the bathtub of goo and they looked around and go, oh man, this is interesting. And everybody's kind of slowly gone back into the goo. But it's just like, well, but I think you're ending up with a lot of people that are not as committed to the role as before. And that is death in sales. If you are not really passionate about what you're doing, that's
have the energy, right?
You're done, right? And that comes across in a sales pitch and in the whole sales process. So I think that there's a massive opportunity for sales leaders to be able to have an honest conversation. What this does not mean is companies need to go and pay somebody to rebuild their value statement and then have a top down, oh, here's what we think. Here's why our stuff is so great. That's all insincere nonsense. I think what the opportunity is at a team level, at an individual level, to get people actually thinking about what drives them. And it doesn't have to be because they're in love with their product. It has to do with, what is it that they're trying to get out of this? How does the organization or team work together? How do they helping? So I see all of this stuff tying together if the right leaders are the ones who can coordinate this. And I love it's a massive opportunity.
I love how you say if the right leaders. I mean, for the last 20 years, particularly in the tech industry, right? Sales managers and middle management has been a joke. All they've been doing is managing down and answering the orders from above and really just playing a really safe place. Most sales managers have never even been salespeople themselves. So they wouldn't even be able to see this. They wouldn't even be able to know that struggle. They probably haven't done a cold call before or been stuck in an office having to do 120 dials, getting rejected every day. And then suddenly when COVID hits, have a piece of that freedom and then come back into the office. Well, that sales manager doesn't necessarily have the same realities to be able to pinpoint what you're saying because they've never experienced it. They've always kind of been sort of in a COVID autonomous reality because all they need to do is just keep their directors or their regional VP comfortable, say the right thing, and pretty much play politics. I mean, I would say tech management has been a very political role, not an actionable one. And very few are really incentivized to uplift the sales team anyway. Uplift the sales skills, uplift the sales mood. I mean, they can do it for, a LinkedIn post or something on Instagram, like the moments that matter most where we're all sharing a pint. But ultimately, what's happening, right? The sales team isn't necessarily getting anything new, but just call the next day, right? So what you're describing is somebody who's kind of you've been in the jungle. You know that when you see a sales rep come out of COVID, even though you have not been a sales rep during COVID, you can see, gee, if I was in that position, this is how I would feel coming back into an office. The manager, more often than not, has zero clue, completely oblivious. You'll lose sales reps and you'll have the manager say, I don't know how could that have happened?
Right.
You know what I mean? It's so great here. Well, for you.
Sure. Yeah, look, it's the classic managing by spreadsheet. And then, by the way, this also happens with great salespeople who get promoted into roles of leadership, and they've got no context to that, which I'm certainly guilty of. Which would be like, I think that everybody else behaves the same way I do, so I'm pretty sure that I just need to leave them alone and let them do it. But like everybody needs to be managed differently, so there's a whole nother skill set of that. And I do think that mid-management layer is an area of massive problems with huge opportunity to be able to put some emphasis on that, right? To be able to fix and work with those people. Because nobody goes to work wanting to be a pain in the ass, right? Everybody's trying to do the best they can. But oftentimes people go in with great intentions, but it's just not being executed the right way.
And that has to do with a lot of the behaviors of the company or shifts and too many,
Yes.
steps in the kitchen up above that change trajectories and says, okay, your team has to produce this. Thus,
Right.
they're trying to respond to that they're not able to think about, well, none of my team wants to be there.
I had this. He's a client and friend, but his business collapsed during COVID. And that was purely based on the market conditions and what they were selling. He had about 20 reps across the region, and their talent, their skill set was in high demand in other areas that, because of COVID, were growing. So in other words, they were getting poached from all different angles. They could make a lot more money if they left. I love his story because he was actually able to hold on to his entire sales team the entire time, rather than lose everybody or get rid of people. He managed up really well. I've written about this. I haven't written about it yet, but it's coming. It's a great story. It's a great case study on a sales leader who was able to create a sense of individual and team purpose in a time of massive disruption. He was able to get people paid enough, and he was able to have every one of those individuals stick around. And they all walked out of when COVID kind of ended and the business picked up again. They were crushing it because you had this group of super ambitious, loyal, hardcore people that had been, properly trained and been conditioning during the downturn. And they just went out and did great. So there are some really cool success stories out there. I know we've been talking a lot about some of the downside, but there's some really cool success stories. And by the way, most of the success stories are at a team level, not necessarily company-wide level. I'm much more interested.
Right?
Or what?
Or even departmental level, right? I mean,
it comes down to individuals who can pick it up. And so that I'm really interested in, those specific skills, those specific actions that people can take to be successful in that way.
Well, what's interesting about what you're saying here, though, right? You're talking about a leader that's looking down to his team or her team.
Yeah.
Not a leader playing and that's the key difference, right? And I think that's the key.
Yeah, and I would say what they do is they provide cover for their team, so they protect the team from the nonsense coming from above. In some of those examples, right? So
willing to be field, right? Willing to be that.
Willing to. That's not a safe place. That's not a safe thing to do. I see a lot of kind of those managers that are either really good at managing up or managing down, but not both. Right.
But I mean, I think that, that's why as a manager, you're paid a premium is to make those calls, right? That's an idealistic world because nobody in the right mind wants to be out of job. Right. Yeah, I get that. But, it's something to think about, managers, mid-managers. So now look, I know that lead generation is kind of, you mentioned that it's a moving target now and it requires creative efforts and there's a lot of stuff that needs to be done. I mean, our push at Consig, particularly my push, I'm not sure if my team is behind me on lead generation is dead yet, but hopefully I'm selling them on it. But, the stance is this. Pipeline, you can always sell into, resell into, generate interest, create networks, create referrals out of a healthy pipeline that goes over a long period of time, right? To take just the lead generation portion out of that and just focus on lead generation being your measurement of success, that in itself is short-term thinking. Where pipeline development and having a healthy pipeline as a company is sustainable long-term thinking. And that's the mindset that I'm hoping we will grow to in this world of sales or whatever. And I'd love to get your take on why I think pipeline building and just if there's any, perspective on
Well, I'd be curious to see if like what kind of metrics do you recommend? Because if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. So like how would you think about repositioning what's getting measured? Because I think ultimately that's one of the problems.
So I give an example, and it's kind of and I say this often to clients and prospects, right? In terms of just doing lead generation, right? Forget sales, lead generation in total. And let's do the Kyle Hegarty targets that used to put me on, which is 100 calls a day, right? What I started to figure out.
By the way, hold that thought just for 1 second. So one thing, right? If you this is a case study. This is the Will Gilchrist case study. I might not have made a huge amount of money from you, but I had massive cost savings from you because my phone bill went way down when you were working, and I saved a fortune.
Skype numbers? You didn't see the Skype numbers? It was also on Skype too.
I kid. Continue.
But it is true. There were some days where I was definitely 40. I was like, he's not going to know. But no, look at the 100 dials a day, right?
Yep.
One thing that I started to learn over time was that it's not 100 dials a day. It can be thousands of dials a day if you understand what's happening. I make 100 dials a day. I have really 20 conversations, only 5 of which was worthwhile, and 1 of which became a lead. That means I have 4 other conversations I could potentially follow up on in the next 2 to 3 months, right? I have probably 30 people that I should not call again because they said actively no.
Yep.
Well, what about the remaining 60, 70? This is pipeline. This is opportunity for me to re-engage as a brand new list the next day, which means that the next day, if I'm given 100, I have 160. And then I also have the other one. So, and if I think about this over a 12-month period, 12 months, I have unlimited ways to approach. And I think once I stopped having a linear approach to leads and started having a more like, okay, wait, I approach this list in this way, this is my 3-month list, this is my 2-week list, this is my 48-hour list, this is my 6-month list, this is my 12-month list, which means they need to be getting emails probably in the next 3 months, every month to follow up. And once I started thinking about it that way, it's very hard to miss a target, because you're thinking about your pipeline over the course of a longer period of time.
Well, it's the one word that we haven't brought up, which we should have multiple times, but it's nurture. Right. I mean, you've got to have a nurture system in place, and I love this one just because I see many times a wonderful PowerPoint. I get PowerPoint slides all the time. Here is our lead nurture system, and it's this beautiful PowerPoint flow and circular, and everything drops out, but it comes back in, and
Venn diagram.
The PowerPoint is gorgeous, and all it takes usually is 1 or 2 deeper dive questions to find that it's non-existent or it doesn't work, or in many cases there's 1 or 2 points of collapse that most people in the organization don't know about. I'll give you one quick example. I know we got to go, but true story. This was a CMO, and they were like, "Here's my PowerPoint, it's gorgeous, blah 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 blah." We look at it, we sold them on a pipeline audit. Said, let's just let us go in and poke around and just see what the flow is looking like. We went through it, and all of the leads that were dropping out to get re-nurtured were then going back to the inside sales team. But there was no conversion happening from those leads that went back to inside sales.
Right.
So it's like, well, that's weird. That shouldn't be happening right there. We found out inside sales was only getting compensated for first-time appointments. They got nothing if they re-nurtured something, right? And as what it goes back to what I said earlier, people behave the way they're incentivized. And so rather than, what they were going to do is do this whole new lead gen effort, this whole new burst of activity, it was like tweak the incentive structure by a fraction of a point to compensate people for getting appointments back in calendars of existing leads. Changed everything.
But who's going to do that, right? Who's going to do that? Because the person who put that nurturing plan has already been compensated. Okay, I did my job. I said nurturing a million times, and I created a nurturing plan.
PowerPoint.
I did my job.
Yeah.
The PowerPoint's beautiful. I've done what I'm supposed to do. So how do you get companies to take action, right? I know we started the live a little bit late, so don't worry too much if it goes like 1 minute. But how do you get the action to happen? Because the buzzword is far more entertaining than the actual result.
Right. Yeah, I guess. Look, I mean, and again, I think that we're heading into a market now where these companies don't have the luxury of having a bunch of hangers on anymore. There's going to be a culling, and it's already happening. So, I think that you're going to find the people that are going to be really successful, the next gen leaders who are really going to figure it out, are the ones that step up and find out some of these gaps. So that was just one example, but it's so classic and it happens all the time. So I think that there are definitely organizations and people that are going to step up and find this stuff, but it takes a little bit of creative thinking and again, like kind of peering outside of the bathtub of goo and thinking a little bit differently about how things work. Hopefully that's where we're heading with this post-pandemic stuff. I think there's big opportunity here.
It's going to be interesting. Well, look, I mean, I wish we had so much more time, Kyle. And look, it's awesome to have my direct mentor, my Yoda, on this. Love to kind of have you back. Hopefully we can get more into this later on at some point. I got to get a few other people on and then get, turned down by a few of the big guys. And then
the big ones. Sure.
I'm out of options when we come back on. So
bring back. Yeah. When I hear that, the bottom of that barrel scraping, I'll know it's you calling.
Right. It's around that time, right? It's like I got my own ringtone. It's just a barrel scraping on the bottom.
Well, at least you're making phone calls sometime. So that's good.
He's quick. All right. Well, Kyle, thanks so much for doing this for me, and really appreciate it. And hopefully we can get into these topics some more. See you in the written world. I see your posts and your newsletters, and hopefully you're seeing mine. I'm just, trying to. I'm a little Padawan, just trying to.
Got to keep those plates spinning. Got to keep that demand gen, keep that pipeline building. Because I keep avoiding the word lead gen because obviously you just killed it. So let's keep that pipeline going.
Triggered. All right, Kyle. Thanks a lot.
Good night.
Bye.